Hey everybody, I have some exciting news to share with you. Here at Rock Harbor, we are going to be hosting a prophecy conference on October 4th. It's a Saturday, and it's going to be right here in Bakersfield at Rock Harbor Church. And we're going to have a prophecy conference about the apostasy of the church. But we're not only going to talk about what's going on in a negative way in the church and how the church is losing its grip with the culture and not contending for the faith. We're going to talk about ways in which we as individual Christians can re-engage in the fight and battle through what's happening not only in the West but around the world. And so we're going to have a great cast of speakers and some top-notch guys that I have lined up, and they're going to have a one-day shot of not only exposing what's going on, but equipping us in, okay, what can I do to be salt and light? How can I go about confronting this that I see in my churches, that I see in my community, that the church is not doing and the pastors are not doing? We are having a leadership deficit. And so we hope from this conference to encourage many people at the grassroots level to take ownership and say, hey, look, will you be able to take out the truth and contend for the faith, be salt and light, because the churches are not doing it anymore. The pastors are not doing it anymore. So it comes down to our responsibility. And so that's what we're geared up for, and it's going to be great. You're going to be blessed, and you're going to walk away fully equipped to be able to handle this culture. And so hopefully mark down your calendars that hopefully you can attend in person, but if not, we'll have a live stream for anyone that can't make it, and it will, either way, it'll be a blessing for you. So mark the date, October 4th. It's a Saturday here in Bakersfield, California at Rock Harbor Church. Hope to see you then. Let's talk about the idiom, the valley of the shadow of death. I've mentioned this before in sermons, especially when we talked about the temptation of our Lord in Matthew. And again, it pops up now that I'm going through the Psalms. I'm bringing out the Hebraisms and the Psalms, and I want to bring these certain things out. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And again, you know, we say this a lot of times, especially at funerals or whatnot, and we talk about the shadow of death, but really that's not what it's referring to. It's referring to the possibility that you could die, but it's referring more of the concept of a possible injury, possible robbery, possible being hurt, and possible death. But it doesn't mean that someone has died and now they're in the valley of the shadow of death. That's not what that means, and that got kind of Americanized or Westernized to mean that, and it doesn't mean that at all. It actually means that I'm alive still, and the threat and the possibility to my life is very much at hand. And as you can see, the words in Hebrew, like gay, means valley or gorge or ravine. You know, and when I'm talking about through the valley of the shadow of death, and it actually refers to a real one. A real land mass, and the mass that's referring to is from, you go from Jericho to Jerusalem. So Jericho is by the Jordan River, and it's east of Jerusalem. And the passageways back and forth from Jerusalem to Jericho were very treacherous. And I'll show you some pictures. I showed you some before. But that's what it's referring to. And again, it's even if you didn't know that, that's what the valley means, the valley of the shadow of death. It's the deepest peril or dread. And yes, it could mean death, but it's a threatening gloom. Something's threatening your life is the idea that's pulled out of that. And again, it's the pathways from the Jordan Basin to Jerusalem. Jordan's very, the Jericho Jordan Basin is very, very low. And then you would ascend up 3,000 something feet to Jerusalem. Doesn't seem like a lot, but by car, it's no problem. But man, when you're walking in those days, it was treacherous to walk that far. and to walk up and to walk through these paths because there was bandits and robbers and a lot of steep cliffs along the way. Let's explain it in context of how it functions in Psalm 23, because this is a very famous song that everyone hears, but they don't know the intent of it. Let's just kind of parse that out a little bit. The concept of the rod and the staff, that's what you would take as a shepherd, obviously, to protect the flock. And it's saying that God's rod and staff, the defense and the guidance of it, will keep you through these perilous valleys, is the idea. So it's an image of God being the active shepherd, winding you through these narrow, dark gorges and valleys of life, and that he is with you through these perilous times. And we all obviously have went through perilous times, and you can think about all the perilous times you have went through, and sometimes they nearly kill us. Sometimes they bring deep pain. Sometimes they bring tragedy to us. And if you look back enough, you'll see the rod and the staff of the shepherd is guiding us through the whole time, and he's working the thing to our good. If you look at that, and that's what David's trying to say here. Again, the other Hebrew word, salmavet, appears across the Tanakh in the Hebrew scriptures as deep darkness. And so that's another idea of, and again, perilous times that come in your life are deep darkness, right? And so I would even say this, as far as a society is concerned, we're in a time of deep darkness. There's light shining, no doubt about that, but there's some bad stuff happening that, man, if it's not corrected, we're going to be in some very perilous times. And I was listening to the debate a little bit today on the radio, and the debate was like it was between conservatives. It's not a Christian debate, but it was a conservative debate, and the debate was, do you go all the way on the FCC and like pulling Jimmy Kimmel and not giving him any grace for what he did, because he's like back on the air on some stations. Some of the other stations refuse to air him, right? And the debate was, well, if you do that to them when they're in power, they're going to do it to you. So you want to think about your conservative talk show guys that are in power now. If you went after the left for now, like Jimmy Kimmel, would they go eventually after you when the exchange of power happens? And that was a political debate, right? That's the idea. But but what we're talking about is we're in such dark times that you can have a guy like Jimmy Kimmel just completely lie, and then ABC, or Disney or whatever forgives them, and he can go over there and never apologize for what he said, and roll with it and shed crocodile tears, and really nothing punitive ever happened to him because of that. That's pretty dark. That's pretty dark, because when is anyone going to pay for their actions? I'm hoping, like, for instance, the judge that let that guy out that killed the Ukrainian girl, the judge that let this guy out 14 times, that judge needs to pay for letting that guy out. He needs to answer for that. And here's the thing, if he doesn't, again, that's a sign of darkness, that there's no justice in our society. And that's what we're talking about, and things like that. And there's all kinds of stuff that continues to happen. AB 495 is on Gavin Newsom's desk as we speak, and they said they were going to arrest it for a while, but all they were waiting for us to stop protesting, and they pulled it out again. They passed it. And so now it just sits on Gavin Newsom's desk to sign, and I'm sure he's going to sign AB 495. If he does that, then you're going to enter an age of darkness where your kids in the public schools are not safe anymore. because that is a groomer's bill. That is, anyone could take custody of your child with no identification. It's a very dark thing, right? And so you can understand, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, though I walk through this darkness, God's saying, I'm going to be with you. My rod and my staff are there to comfort you, and I will guide you through all of this. So, very dark stuff, but at the end of the day, as a believer, you have to realize that you have God on your side, and God will navigate your path through this, even though it looks very treacherous, and it is very treacherous. Anyway, I think I showed you this, 4 or 5 Sundays ago, and these are the paths from Jericho to Jerusalem, and there's a monastery there, that's built in one of the paths, and you can see the paths underneath the monastery. So that's what you would have to, the paths you would have to go on and travel on from Jericho to Jerusalem. And then I think I showed you this before. You can see the little hiker there. Yeah, that's the paths. These are the valleys that it's referring to. This is the valley of the shadow of death. Not it, but all these ravines and stuff. This whole topography area, this is what it looks like. And see, this is a real broad path, but not of them are. You could drive on that one. But then there's another one, and there's some buildings built on these paths and stuff. And see what the idea is. You can see the right angles in the paths when they kind of wind. And what would happen is robbers would wait just on those other side of the right angles. So you're walking down the path, and a minute you turn, and then there they are, and you never saw them coming because you couldn't see ahead of yourself. That was why it made it so treacherous with robbers and being left for dead. If they robbed you and killed you or whatever they did. So anyway, that's the idea of the valley of the shadow of death. It's the ravines. And you can make it out to perilous times, darkness in our lives, but the idea that God is with us in that's what David was trying to say. So anyway, okay, let's move then to the second Hebraism I want to pull out in Psalm 23, and a lot of people say it, but they don't know what it means. You prepare a table before me. And this is very Near Eastern, very Hebraic, to understand this background on Psalm 23. The meaning. Well, there's 2 ways you can sense this, and I've read all through this, and there's debate on what David's trying to get across. It could mean he's going with the shepherd imagery, or it could go that he's going to a royal host. So both are legit. Both are legit on the Hebraism. So let's take the shepherd's read on this, if this is consistent with the Lord is my shepherd. The table doesn't necessarily a wood table or something that you put in front of you that you would eat on. It actually refers to a flat ground that you would put the sheep on. And so it's kind of like a tableland is the idea. And if you have to understand the topography of Israel to understand what David's trying to say. David grew up in Bethlehem. And if you recall Bethlehem, if you've looked at the topography of Bethlehem, which is south of Jerusalem, it's very hilly, very hilly. And there really is not a flat piece of ground. It's very hard to find. It's very hilly. So what the shepherds would do in that area, then when they would find these flat spots, and that's where they would take and feed the flock and get them to rest on the way back to the fold. And that was kind of the idea. That's the shepherd's read. And so you can read it that way. But then the concept of the enemies, then you have to think in terms of you prepare us a table in the presence of my enemies, and the fact that the enemies would be the coyotes, the wolves, the bears, the lions, and so the shepherd would have to do that and protect them. And then what he would do at night as he's getting them back into the sheepfold, he had a stone or even a cave that he would use as a sheepfold. And it could be a stone wall, but it would only have one entrance. Or it's a cave has one entrance. And so there's a lot of caves in Bethlehem. You would put the flock in the cave, and then the shepherd would lay in front of the door. He would be the door himself. And so you had that with stone corrals. And so it's either one, either the caves or the stone corrals. And again, the shepherd then would sit there, and they were protected by the corral or the cave, and him being at the front of the door. And I think that's where the imagery comes, where Jesus says, I'm the door, right? I'm the door. You have to go through me. And so in order to get to the flock, you would have to go through the shepherd to get to them. He was the way in and out, right? That's the idea with the shepherding thing. If we pivot and think, well, okay, that's one interpretation. That's a very likelihood interpretation of you prepare us a table in front of my enemies. You also can then interpret, and this is allowable as well, as God is being pictured as the royal host that's laying out a banquet in full view of David's enemies. And what does that mean? It would mean that God is signaling that I can give you provision, I can give you protection, I can give you vindication, whatever, and I don't have to remove your enemies first. I can do it in the very presence of your enemies. I can make this happen despite your enemies. Now, a lot of us want to, we pray that, take away our enemies. There's no doubt about that. Take away Gavin Newsom and take away Nancy Pelosi and take away all, Joy Reid and take away, The View and take away all these people, and the list is long of who I would want, Lord, take them away. I'm not saying kill them. I'm saying, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about get them off the scene. Let them go somewhere else other than in politics and stuff like that. I'm not saying, Lord, kill them, but just get them off the scene. But he typically doesn't do that. That's not typically how he works. Because, one of the requests that a lot of us make was take away Satan, take away demons, take away fallen angels. And he doesn't. He keeps them here. And so the asking of the removal of evil is sometimes, most often, not answered. Because what Psalm 23 is saying, no, you don't understand. I am going to prepare a table in the midst of your enemies. I don't want to remove you, and neither do I want them removed from you. I'm actually going to do this right in the middle and the heart of the war. I want your enemies to see how I provide. I want your enemies to see the protection I give you and the honor and the vindication I will give you. So I am not removing them and I am not removing you. Now that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But if you understand what God's trying to do, He is trying to send a message that if you think I'm afraid of Satan, if you think I'm not me but God, or the demons or the minions or the evil people in this world, you're not thinking straight. These are toys. These are pawns. They're nothing to God. Not that people don't have value. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you think that's a threat to God, you have another thing coming. And so what David is trying to picture is, look, God is so powerful, He can protect you in the midst of enemies, and they can't touch you if He doesn't want them to touch you. And He will do so. And again, this is not a foolproof. This is a psalm. This is a generality, right? This is not something that makes you bulletproof, and wherever you go, you're bulletproof. That's not what he's saying. Like for Charlie, it was Charlie's time, But does that, when he says this, does that mean you don't have security? No, you have to have security. Does that mean you don't have insurance? No, you have to have insurance. But when you're looking at the Psalms and you're looking at the wisdom literature, these are generalities. In general, this is what He will do. He will prepare a table for your enemies. And then the idea is to vindicate you. And He did that with Christ. So, I mean, that's the ultimate example of the vindication. And He did it in front of their enemies. With the vindication, obviously, the resurrection. What could they do at that point once He was resurrected? What can they do other than lie? And just continue to double down on the lie. That's all they can do. It's just like what you're seeing with Charlie Kirk and his death. I mean, how many lies have you seen? I think we're on line number 6 of who shot him. And it just keeps getting changed and changed and changed and changed, and they wouldn't admit it was a radical leftist. The story changed 6 times. Did you know that? 6 times. Because they wouldn't admit who he was. So what did people do? They doubled down. They doubled down. And that's what happened with Christ. They just kept doubling down. Anyway, the theological concept then and the idea here is that what you're seeing is when you're in a relationship with God, this is the covenant hospitality that God provides. We all know about hospitality, but again, it's God showing us the hospitality by spreading a table, a royal banquet in front of our enemies. And the future, what it points to then in this interpretation is that it's pointing to the future marriage supper of the Lamb. And I think I mentioned last time about Leviathan that in the Hebrew tradition, at the marriage supper of the Messiah, you actually ate Leviathan for dinner. Kind of a defeating aspect to it. And so with this royal banquet, it is prepared. And it's prepared and it's going to be on earth. It'll be the first day of the kingdom. And it will be done when all the enemies are vanquished at that point in time. But again, there's an aspect that has an eschatology to Psalm 23 that looks forward to ultimately this happening. And again, it comes on the heels of the tribulation period where God just destroys all of his enemies and vanquishes them. And through the Messiah and through his judgments, Satan is bound for 1,000 years along with his minions, and they can't do any more activity. And so then the banquet is prepared. So it looks forward to that day. So Psalm 23 has an eschatological future look to it in that idea. Let's do then a Christological application of this passage. So we have an eschatological application, but then you have an application for here and now. And so the idea is that you and I are in covenant with God through the new covenant, and therefore he creates this meal of fellowship with us in a hostile world. And that fellowship gives us nourishment, it gives us identity, and it gives us a pledge of future glory is the concept there. So that's why this Middle Eastern idea of fellowship and having a meal together, that is a big deal. For us, we don't think anything about it. In the Middle East, that's how you fellowship. You always fellowshipped around a meal. And the host would prepare it, and he would put his best foot forward. No matter how poor they were, they would kill the fatted calf, and they would just bring out everything for you, the best silverware, everything to you, to take care of you. Because that's what a host was responsible for. This is Middle Eastern host kind of concept. And so that's what Christologically it applies as well, that Messiah, because we're in covenant with him, does this for us. And think about that. The spiritual nourishment Messiah gives when you're in fellowship with him, the identity that he gives you, which is very important because you have to know who you are, and then the hope that you get by being in that relationship of that fellowship. So all of that brings the idea that you're taken care of, and you're always going to be taken care of no matter what. Some points of application then for this a little bit. Number one is vindication. It's vindication. Vindication is God setting things right when you've been lied about, when you've been betrayed, when you have been slandered, whatever, are not upheld, passed over for a promotion or whatever, or ignored, not taken care of, not nurtured, all that stuff, okay? So what God is promising you in this, in preparing your table, is one day I'm going to vindicate you. One day I'm going to set it all right. And everything that was done to you, that you were lied about, you were slandered, you were betrayed, you were maligned, you were ignored, you were passed over, whatever's going on, I'm going to vindicate you. That's what he's saying. I promise I will vindicate you. And that's the promise we have. And that promise of vindication prevents us from taking matters into our own hands and taking revenge. That's what it does, is that he will vindicate. Now, I've given this example multiple times, and by now you should probably know it. But, the Lord was vindicated, not just simply by the resurrection, but he was vindicated by, not from Israel, because Israel, when he goes into Israel, as you know, on Palm Sunday, he's going in as the Passover lamb, and he's going to be inspected for the next 4 days, as you would any Passover lamb. So from Sunday to Wednesday, he's inspected by the religious leaders. And by Wednesday, he's left them dumbfounded. They can't even speak at that point in time. But what should have happened? On Wednesday, when you had your little lamb, and you had inspected him for 4 days, you would declare that the lamb was clean, that the lamb was without blemish, without spot. And it was able to be offered now as a sacrifice on Passover. And so Israel, their leadership, refused to declare the unblemished Lamb of God. They wouldn't do it. They refused. And so, lo and behold, God vindicates him. And how does he vindicate him? He vindicates him on Friday. And how does he vindicate him? And through who? He does it through a pagan. And he does it 3 times. And when God does something 3 times, he's sending a message. He does it 3 times through Pontius Pilate, who declares Jesus, I find this man to be innocent. I find no fault in this man. And he's innocent. He says it 3 times. And that is, okay, Israel, you don't want to declare that the lamb is spotless? I'll have a pagan declare that the lamb is spotless in order to be sacrificed. And so Pilate declares him innocent. Of course, he tries to wash his hands of everything and get out of the whole mess, but he couldn't. And so what happens? He's vindicated. Christ is vindicated by being declared innocent by Rome, by a pagan. And that's a picture of what I'm trying to talk about is you got people that will ignore you, that will not see, maybe like in a job, they pass you over because it's a good old boy system and they don't see, your talent, they don't see how hard you work or anything. And a lot of people are passed over because of a good old boy system or, favoritism, nepotism, or anything like that. All that junk that you've encountered, God says, I'm going to prepare a table before your enemies and I'm going to vindicate you. That satisfies a lot of things in us, man, because, man, people grow up and their parents ignore them. Their parents don't love them. That's the trait for the millennials. That's the trait for Gen Z. That's the trait for my generation. The parents just ignored a lot of the kids. They're just ignored. That's why they called latchkey. And a lot of kids weren't nurtured. Well, in my counseling, I find this abundantly clear in a lot of people's upbringing. They just weren't nurtured properly. And the parents, for whatever reason, they're goofy or crazy or narcissistic or whatever they are, or just dumb, didn't know how to properly love people. And they did a terrible job. And so a lot of people go through life with all these wounds of like, I was totally ignored by my parents. I was totally ignored by my dad, totally ignored by my mom or whatever. They were busy doing drugs. They were busy doing this, doing that, whatever. Dude, it's like a constant theme I hear. And what I have to tell these people is that one day you will be vindicated. You will. You will. That's why it says, thou shalt honor your father and mother, and it doesn't say thou shalt love your father and mother. And that's for that reason. Because a lot of people can't pull it out of themselves to love their parents because their parents were so degenerate. And I'm telling you, like, it's an 80-20 thing. Like 80% of the people had a bad upbringing, at least as far as who come to counseling. Maybe that stat would be different, but I don't know. But it's almost an 80-20. And again, we're not here to blame parents or use scapegoats, but a lot of people were passed over. A lot of people had to deal with favorites in the family. A lot of people had to deal with just knuckleheads, man. And so the person wasn't paid attention to. And so God says, I'm going to vindicate you. And that happens in work, right? That happens in work. You get passed over in work because this guy knows this guy, and he's not that good, but he knows this guy, so this guy gets promoted and not you. Or this guy, licks boots, but he's terrible, but he can lick good boots, and so they promote him, and you get passed over because you refuse to pander, you refuse to lick boots and stuff like that. Stuff like that happens, and you get cheated and stuff like that. Or how about this one? The hardest one to deal with, that most people struggle with, is betrayal. Betrayal is the number one thing that destroys people, is that they're betrayed by somebody that they loved. And that betrayal, man, it's like someone takes a knife and just sticks the dagger right in your heart, man. And that betrayal, boy, howdy. I think in Dante's Inferno, he put betrayal in the lowest depths of hell in Dante's Inferno. And I know why, because it's such a very difficult thing to get over. When you know that someone should have loved you, and that was natural, and they just flat out betrayed you like a sheep-killing dog, that's painful. But what God is saying is, I'm going to vindicate you one day. That pain that you're carrying, I'm going to vindicate you. The rejection is the second most dreaded thing that people feel is rejection. They feel rejected from life, from parents, all that other stuff. And so this is where vindication comes in. That one day you will not feel rejected anymore. You're already accepted, obviously, but I'm gonna heal you of that rejection problem that you had. So anyway, if God's doing that to us now and future vindication, then you're to turn around and do it to others because they need help. And so we want to practice what we call protective hospitality. And what does that look like? Well, this is when you start talking to other believers and you start hearing their story, and sometimes it's very difficult. We have to vindicate them too. We have to give them dignity. We have to give them respect. We have to encourage them and say the proper things to say, hey, man, you know what? You can make it. You can win. You can survive. I'll walk with you through this. We'll get through this together. And they got to know that someone's with them and that, hey, man, I believe you. I don't believe the liar. I believe you. And that's what a lot of people need. They need someone to believe in them, believe what's happening, and come alongside and protect them as much as possible. Not like God, but obviously as much as possible. And you become the royal host. You prepare the banquet for them. That's the idea. So what God gives to us, we turn around and get. Now this is important because you can't give out that which you do not take in. So like if you want to be more loving or kind or whatever the virtue is, you actually have to take in it from God. Because it's not endemic to you. It only comes from God. Agape is not endemic to us. Agape only comes from God. In order to give agape out, you have to receive it from God, and then you're able to give it out. Well, the same is true. I have to accept the table of provision that God gives me in the midst of my enemies, whatever that provision is, and I must accept the table. Look, when the shepherd, if I go to the shepherding imagery, the sheep did not get to choose where the table would be. The shepherd does, right? The shepherd decides, this looks like a good piece of land. I'm going to take the flock here, and this is where they will rest, and I will feed them before we go back to the sheepfold. So it's the shepherd who makes the decision of where to place the banquet, where to place the table. It's not the sheep. So what ends up happening is, in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of all this other stuff, you have all this stuff happening to the person, but then the banquet is laid out before them, in front of them by God, and they don't like the banquet. They don't accept the banquet. They don't like where the table is set because they want their enemies to be removed. or they want to be removed from their enemies. And God's saying, I'm not removing either of you. I'm going to do it right here. I'm choosing to set the table right here. Now accept it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't accept the provision. A lot of people don't accept where the help is coming from. And I go back to, like Elijah, when God, he's running, obviously, from Jezebel. Jezebel's after him, and this is after he's killed the 400 prophets of Baal. And he's running, and he's trying to find some rest. Well, God gives him some rest. He finds a little brook, but then he has to be fed by ravens. Remember that? Well, a raven's an unclean bird. You would never accept, as a Jewish person, you would never accept food from an unclean bird. It would taint you. But there is no other provision other than that. So Elijah has to accept the food from the raven in order to be sustained in the presence of his enemies. And his enemy is who? Jezebel, coming after him, wanting to kill him. So the table set before Elijah is the little brook and the ravens feeding him. So this is what I have to say to a lot of people. I have to point out a lot of times, well, you have this resource here, and you have this resource here, and this resource here, and it looks like you can make this happen. And they're like, well, I don't like that resource, and I don't like that, and I don't like that. I want it to be different. Oh, well, then I don't know what to tell you at that point, because now you're rejecting the table set before you. This is the table God's setting out. And if you don't like the raven feeding you, then where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And look, everything's for a season, right? Every table he sets before you is a season. Because what happened to the brook that Elijah was drinking from? It dries up. And when a brook dries up, that means the table is somewhere else. And where did he end up going? Where did he get his next meal from? You remember? A Gentile woman. That's where his next meal was. A Gentile woman. Then her son died. Remember that? And she had a little meal and a little oil, and it kept lasting and lasting. So imagine if you're Elijah. So you finally get over the raven, and you're like, okay, I'll take the food for him because I'm starving. I don't know where else to go. And then the brook dries up, and God's now going to prepare another table here, and it's worse because now it's a Gentile woman, which you're not supposed to even touch. You're not even supposed to go into the house of a Gentile woman. You're not even supposed to go in there. And yet now I'm going to place the table right here, and that's where you're going to be, at a Gentile's house and a woman of all people. Wow. Okay. And she's a widow too. So it adds to the point that wherever I make the table for you, you need to accept it. Now, here's the thing. You might not like where you're planted at right now. Okay? You may not like it. You may not like Bakersfield. You may not like California. I get it. You may not like your job. You may not like your neighborhood. You may not like anything. Okay? You don't like where you're at. But the issue is this the table he set for you? Because if it is, you have no other option. He's saying this is the best place for you, at least for right now. Okay? Don't try to think about escaping it until the brook dries up. And then if the brook dries up, then maybe I'll move you somewhere else. But if you keep thinking that the next table that I set for you is going to be in Hawaii, and it's going to luau, and the torch dancers are going to come out, and you're going to have poi, and you're going to have a great time at the luau and be free of all your enemies, you have another thing coming. Right? That's what people want. They want the banquet not set in front of their enemies. I don't want to eat and look across the table and see my enemies over there hiding in a bush. Do you? No, I want to be on the tropical island away from my enemies, right? And that's where I want the table. But that's not what David is saying. You prepare a table before my enemies. Yeah. I'm going to have you look them right in the eye. Every day when you get up, especially if you hate your neighborhood. You're going to look at that neighbor that you don't like every stinking day for the next 30 years. You're like, oh no, that can't be. But you start seeing this. Wait a second. This is where the ravens are. This is where your provision is. This is where I have you planted. Don't try to move. Just stay there, and I'll take care of you. That's what that passage means. So anyway, let's move on. Another Hebraism. He has lifted up his heel against me. Now, again, this goes back to betrayal. This is an idiom about betrayal, and it's the idea that someone sticks out their foot to trip you. So they lift up their heel to trip you, is the idea. So he goes, even in my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. So it's betrayal. And like I said, betrayal is like one of the worst things that can happen to you, right? But it's the idea of tripping someone that's close to you. That you would never expect anyone to do this to you that's close to you. And the idea is, the sting of this is because they ate at your table with you. And again, eating at your table always in the Hebrew mindset means fellowship, right? Fellowship. We're in fellowship together. You ate my bread. Who ate my bread, right there? That's the idea. You were in my house. We had fellowship with one another, right? Which means that if you ate the bread of someone's house, you were protected by their hospitality, and they were loyal to you as you were in the house. They were protecting of you. So this is obviously the quintessential example of this is Judas, obviously, right? Judas betrayed our Lord. And of all people, he betrayed innocent blood, right? Jesus never did anything. So he's the least likely person to ever be betrayed, but yet he was. He had never done anything wrong to Judas, and that's what happened. That's the problem with betrayal. The problem with betrayal is the person is typically innocent, and they haven't done anything to cause the betrayal. That's typically why betrayal is so hard. Now, everybody can understand, well, if someone was goading the person and doing bad things to them or whatever, then we can all understand that. When someone retaliates or leaves or whatever they do, if there was just a history of all bad stuff. But that's not the concept of betrayal. The concept of betrayal is what you see in our Lord. He didn't do anything to cause Judas to betray him. That's what makes betrayal so difficult, is the person typically hasn't done anything. Now we're talking about us. We're talking about relatively, we're all sinners. I'm not talking about that, but, was not actively pursuing somebody and trying to hurt them is the idea. And so the betrayal just comes out of nowhere. Now, why do people betray? So this is where you have to depersonalize the betrayal. Because if the person, like Jesus, is totally innocent and is not doing anything, then what caused the motivation to betray innocent blood? Like with Judas, what was his motivation? Money. Just money. Stupid. Just wants money. He's an idiot. That's like the biggest idiotic thing you could possibly do, is betray the Son of God for 30 pieces of silver. So stupid. But when you look at betrayal, that's what we're talking about, is that the motivations are typically so stupid. It's all from the flesh. It's driven from the flesh. It's nonsense. It's only temporary. It's in the moment. And it's just dumb. Sin is dumb, right? Sin is dumb. So a lot of times what I have to do in counseling is, if someone has been betrayed, I have to take them down to see and depersonalize it for them. And to show you, well, what happened to you, let's look at the perpetrators. Okay, what were they doing? Well, it was my parents, and they divorced. Okay. So you were not really the cause of the divorce, even though you personalized it. You think, well, that there was something wrong with me, so that's why they divorced. And we're like, no, that's wrong. It was that your parents had deficiencies in their relational abilities. You see that your mom had this, and your dad had that, and that really made for a firestorm. It's not going to work. It had nothing to do with you. And so what I'm doing for the person, I'm saying, it's not about you. It's about your parents not having the relational skills to stay together. And once they can depersonalize, oh, it's not about me. No, it's not about you. It's just about them and their deficiencies. Yeah, maybe they're narcissistic. Maybe they're selfish. Maybe they're this, they're that, whatever the issue is. Then they can see it in the true light of what it is. Oh, it's not about me. It's about them. Right. And so it instantaneously depersonalizes it. And hence, this allows the person to forgive them, even in the worst betrayals. Because it typically is not about the other person. It typically is about this person had a motivation to get something, to want something, to desire something, and that's what drove them insane, to do something stupid. And that's where grace comes in. That's where mercy comes in. That's where forgiveness can come in. And if I can get the person to see that and depersonalize it, they can release it. They can give grace and they can give mercy. It's a hard place to get. Don't get me wrong. It's a very hard place to get. It's not overnight. It takes like sometimes a year to 2 years to walk someone through that, to get them to finally depersonalize it and say, it's not about me, it was about them. Yeah. It's hard, very hard. And so that's what the idea of betrayal is. You always have to understand it's not about you, it's about their desires for something else. Okay? That's what you have to understand. Anyway, when you're betrayed, when you're rejected, when any of these things that happen to you, trauma, whatever is going on with you, here's what you have to do. You have to lament it. You should be sad. You should grieve. And here's the thing. I understand the first reaction you're going to have when someone betrays you is anger. That's the first one, man. And you go hot real quick. You get really hot, and you could sustain that hotness for a long time. Anger can last for a very long time. But here's the thing. If you get stuck in anger, you're not grieving. So you've got to go through the grieving process. And so when you've been betrayed, rejected, you have to grieve what you lost. You lost something. We all have to understand that. You lost something. Now, here's the good news. You get everything back in the future with Christ, right? So it's temporary loss. It's not permanent loss, right? You have to keep that in mind. But you did lose something. And because you lost something, you need to grieve it. And if you don't grieve it, what happens is your grieving process that God gave you is what actually heals you. That's actually what brings closure to everything, is if you will go through the stages of grief. You have to recognize them, anger, but, I'm going to go through bargaining. Well, if I would have done this, I would have done that. If I would have done this different. No, don't bargain. You're just getting stuck. You'll get stuck in depression. That's when you're stuck. And then you finally got to move to healing. And healing is I can let go now because I have grieved. I have to grieve over it because I lost something. And then moving forward, here's the other thing. If you have been betrayed, and a lot of people have, okay, by family members, spouses, the whole thing, right? It is not forgive and forget, okay? You can forgive vertically, and then you can forgive horizontally if the person repents. And again, it doesn't mean you have to restore the relationship and reestablish fellowship, like I always say. That's your choice. But here's what you must do. You must not forget. And the reason I'm telling you must not forget, so that you don't get burned twice. That's what you don't want happening to you. And that's why the stupid psychologists, secular psychologists, will try to sweep everything under the rug and tell you to forget and move on. You are not to forget. You are to remember so it doesn't happen again. You are to remember so that you can see the signs when someone's playing you. So that you can see the signs of, oh, that's how betrayal starts. It starts here. I remember they were lying, and I remember they were doing this, and yeah, that's right. They had a pattern, didn't they? They established a pattern in front of you, didn't they? Yes, don't forget the pattern, because humans notoriously repeat the patterns over and over again. So you don't want to forget. You want to remember to protect yourself. And then at the end of that, you had to follow Christ's pattern. He didn't get bitter. He maintained his integrity, right? He maintained his meekness, power under control, and said, the Lord will vindicate me. I'll put this in the Lord's hands. Even with the Roman soldiers that were crucifying him. What did he say to the Roman soldiers that were crucifying him? They didn't even know who he was. What did he say about them? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He was talking about the Roman soldiers. They didn't have any clue they were crucifying the Son of God. Had no clue. So he asked for forgiveness for them. So that's the idea right there, right? That's vertical forgiveness, right? The soldiers were not asking for forgiveness. Let's go one quick one, and then we'll finish on this one. And this is Psalm 51. This is David's lament after he sins with Bathsheba. This is his psalm of repentance. And he says, create in me, a contrite heart. And he talks about the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, God, you will not despise. And so this is the concept of what it takes to repent. Broken and contrite means crushed is the idea. It's a picture that the inner self is shattered. Okay, the inner pride is shattered, and the heart has now been humbled because it's been crushed or broken. And being crushed or broken inside allows proper repentance. And that's what David is asking. Now, brokenness is a separate thing from spiritual bankruptcy, but the two are tied together. I talked about this on Sunday about being spiritually bankrupt or spiritual poverty, understanding your spiritual poverty in order to have this hunger for God, right? To find out the solution to your problem spiritually. Well, a lot of times people will not get in touch with their spiritual poverty. And they don't have a sense or a need for God, or even if they're a believer, to read his Bible or to pray or be around fellow believers like you are tonight. They don't have a feeling like that. So you know what God has to do? Especially if they're believers. He has to break them. And that's not fun. That's not fun at all. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt, don't want any more. Been there, done that. I don't want to do that, man. And when he breaks you, he literally shatters the false identity inside of you. There's nothing left of that identity anymore. He shatters it. And you're broken and you're on the ground spiritually speaking, and there's nowhere else to go because he shattered it. Or he allowed life to shatter it, right? And if you haven't been broken, then you don't know what I'm talking about. But when you're shattered, then you really see how you are, and it is correlated then to spiritual poverty, because then he shows you how you are. But again, the two are related, but sometimes brokenness must happen in order to get your attention to see your need. And honestly, this would be a good prayer if you're praying for someone, a loved one right now, and a family member that is bullheaded, is stiff-necked, is prideful and arrogant, and on this bender to I'm my own God type of thing. Ask the Lord in prayer to break them. That's a hard prayer to pray, I know. But he can break people like no others, okay? He can really bring people down to their knees without killing them, okay? It's what I'm talking about. And he knows how to best get their attention. That's a good prayer. Pray. Pray that they're broken. Pray that something would happen. Like, you don't know what can break the person. It's sometimes a relationship can break the person. Sometimes money, losing it all, can break the person. Sometimes losing their job. Sometimes losing their reputation. I don't know. Sometimes losing their spouse. Whatever. Brokenness is when you lose something. And it's not a bad prayer to pray that they lose something in order to wake up. And look, if they wake up and they get their head screwed on straight, great, fantastic. It's better to go into heaven limping and blind without an arm, right, than not go at all, right, or whatever. But that's the idea. So that's brokenness. The theological idea is this. What God is wanting with David's heart, and what David's explaining, is your heart has got to be right first over the ritual. Okay? So David's talking about sacrificing. Well, you all know, and I know too, if you were in the Mosaic system and I went to the temple, I could still do the sacrifices and my heart not be right. Right? I can still go through the motions. That's the idea. I can still play Christian and go through the motions, but my heart not be right. My attitude internally is not right. That's what David is saying. God prefers your heart to be right before you're sacrificing. Because if you're sacrificing with your heart not there, then what's in it? I would prefer not to. That's what God's saying. Get your sacrifice if your heart's not in it. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. That's why he even talks about a cheerful giver. If you don't want to give, then don't give. God doesn't want your money. He's saying that's another form of sacrifice. If you're giving grudgingly to, a missionary or whatever, I don't want to support that guy. I get a flat screen TV at Best Buy if I didn't support this missionary guy, in the Ukraine or whatever he is. Well, then don't give, because he doesn't need your money, and God could find another way to funnel money to that guy in Ukraine or whatever, and you're better off not giving, because now because of your sour attitude towards him or towards giving, you're not going to get rewarded anyway because of your bad attitude. You can go through the ritual and give it and write a check. But if your heart's not in it, then don't even write the check. If you don't want to really do it, that's what God's trying to say. So the idea is, when we go to the gospel and we move into the New Testament, this is where it produces repentance. Brokenness, a contrite heart, all those things produces change. Now, here's the thing. Again, I bring back to my counseling. If someone comes to me and they say, I want to change. Well, that's great. I'm glad you want to change. It's wonderful. But how are we going to do this? Well, I want to change this habit. How long have you been doing it? About 25 years. Oh, okay. Whatever that might be, the habit of smoking or whether they want to stop doing something, right? They want to stop overeating, whatever it might be. Okay. So you've been doing this 25 years, yeah. Okay. So in order for you to change, the initial thing that needs to happen in you is you need to be broken over your sin. Are you broken over your sin? Well, no, I don't really feel that bad about it, and well, that's the problem. Because if you truly felt broken for this, where your insides are shattered to the ground, I wouldn't have to encourage you to want to do this. It would be the natural reaction of your mourning. Your mourning over your brokenness would say, I've got to stop this. I've got to change. And what your response would be, tell me how to do it, because I already have the desire to do it. See, that's the thing. So if you go to counseling or anyone and you want to get help and you really want to change, you have to be broken over it. You just can't say, I want to change and not be broken over it, because I can guarantee you, if you're not broken over it, it's like letting the prisoners out of Laredo. What do? In 2 weeks, they're back in. They'll just keep, recidivism, what is it called? Recidivism? It's a big fancy word. They keep repeating. And that's what will happen. And I'll talk to somebody and they keep struggling and struggling. And what you find out is they're not broken over it. They're not broken over it. Now, how do you get broken over it? Well, first of all, you have to see inside you that what you're doing is affecting other people. Because if you don't see how it affects other people, it won't become real to you. Because you'll think, well, I'm just doing this myself. So what does it matter? And a lot of people have this love-hate relationship with themselves. They don't care about abusing themselves. They really don't. They will abuse themselves. But then that's the problem. They're thinking too much of themselves, and you have to get the person outside of themselves and thinking about, well, look what you're doing to your kids. Look what you're doing to your spouse. Look what you're doing here. Look what you're doing there. And then what happens is, if they can see what their behavior is doing to the other person, that breaks them. That starts hurting them. Okay? They don't really care about hurting themselves. They get broken by seeing what they're doing to others. And that's where you want to get them to. You have to move them in that direction to see that, and that's what causes the brokenness. Now, if you can get someone broken and shattered inside in a good way, it leads to repentance every time. Godly sorrow leads to repentance, Paul says. But here's the thing, the person has to get there. So you know what happens to a lot of us, especially in those in counseling? People will bring people to me and want me to fix them. Okay? And it don't work. Because the person they're bringing to me doesn't want to be fixed. Because the person they're bringing to me is doing it to satisfy them. And so when I get there, there's no heart in it. There's not like, what are you doing? Well, nothing, man. I'm just here because, my spouse wanted me to come here and talk to you, and she thought you could help me. So you have no problem whatsoever. No, I'm golden, man. I don't know what her problem is. So here we are wasting a whole 45 minutes to an hour trying to figure out what this guy's problem is. He doesn't even think he has a problem. He's just doing it to satisfy his wife. And it's like, oh my gosh, never mind. Write that one off. That's an hour I can never get back. But that's what happens, right? And I can take it even further than this. Like, let's talk about demon possession, for instance. A lot of people don't understand it. I'll give you an example. A demon cannot possess the soul of the individual. The demon will possess the body. But here's the thing. God reserves that person has their integrity inside of them, that they still have their will, even in a demon possession. And here's the key on demon possession. If the person wants out of the demon possession, they can ask for help and get out of it. Did you know that? That's what makes demon possession so difficult, is the person doesn't want them to leave. So I'm giving you, that's an extreme case, right? Demon possession, oh my God. And even in that case, if the person is broken and wants out of the possession, they can get out of it on their own. They really can. Now, they might have to have some help from outside, but if they're willing and broken and they want out of it, they'll get out of it. Every time. God reserves their free will even in demon possession. Even in demon possession. But they have to be broken and want it. They have to want out of it. Isn't that crazy?